How the Dems Stole Christmas. It's a charming story of people being, thrown out of law so they might be forced into union should they ever get work again someday. Perhaps. It's going on in California right now. It's been going on since the 1st of January when AB-5 passed. And now we're finding out it's affecting everybody all the way down to mall Santas who might not have any work come this Christmas. Hey, everybody, I'm Steve Green with Bill Whittle and Scott Ott. And please forgive my voice. I came back from CPAC with the sea plague, and I'm doing what I can. It's NyQuil and powering through. So, gentlemen, I wanted to read you something that I ran across. I've been following this story since the legislation became first noticed back in December. And as I said, it went into effect on January 1st. And there is a guy on Facebook, Jerry Tamburino, and I'm using his name because he posted this not anonymously on an AB5 group on Facebook. And just let me read this to you. He says, I'm an independent contractor in California. I am an entertainer. I am a drummer for a popular band in Northern California. I get paid by the band, which consists of 4 members, using a 1099. That's the tax form everybody gets if they're an independent contractor. If AB5 is not amended or repealed, we will have to stop performing since there is no way for the band to claim us as employees. I am also a professional Santa. I get my pay for this work, $10.99, by an agency that places me at a high-volume retail location. The agency is compensated by a percentage of my earnings, so cannot afford to claim me as their employee. I have been at the same location for over 10 years. AB5 has thrown this end of my work into complete confusion. I may have to stop being the Santa for thousands of children if AB5 is not altered or repealed. This is an incredibly poorly thought-out law that will affect my livelihood and lifestyle drastically, as well as many families who expect and deserve my services. Scott, when you've got Democrats, and this thing was passed by the California Assembly, controlled by Democrats, signed by the mayor, another Democrat, when you have Democrats almost literally waging war on Christmas like this, is this an issue, finally, that the GOP and conservatives can use to try and tell people, aren't you sick of getting it good and hard from the people you voted for?
This is another one of these many examples where the progressives believe or say they believe that they are fighting for the little guy, and the poor little guy can't fight for himself. You know, the pathetic schlubs like you and I who are getting 1099s have no ability to make wise decisions for our own lives. We're trapped in, practically indentured servitude working for Bill Whittle because, we can't possibly get employment anywhere else. And because of that, we have to have somebody in the government fight for our right to work for a big corporation that has, full benefits and a living wage and stuff like that. Of course, what it really means is that guys like Bill Whittle won't be able to hire guys like me because the kind of work I do is intermittent and it doesn't happen on a 40-hour work week schedule. And the small companies, by and large, by the way, this is not major corporations for the most part that are affected by this. This is a lot of mom and pop shops and a lot of small businesses that are affected by this ability to be able to hire people, many of whom are making extra income. And I think that's the other kind of phase shift that the Democrats use. They reposition this and say, well, this isn't some guy, who's driving a car ride-sharing service so he can earn some extra income from his family. All of these people are totally dependent on only this income for their sustenance, and therefore they're being ripped off. Well, even if that were true, if their plans continue and persist and succeed and spread across the country, it just means that a lot of companies that exist now to provide services of value to people who can afford to pay for them will become unaffordable because those companies won't be able to hire the people to execute those services. And it is cutting off your nose to spite your face. So, I don't know how people in California who are so, in many cases, dependent upon this gig economy, not just the entertainment industry, but think of the whole technology sector. I mean, there are lots and lots of freelance coders and web developers and graphic artists and people like that out there who are dependent on this 1099 income. And now we're going to find employers telling them, hey, I'm sorry, we can't afford to pay you anymore because the government requires we put you on full time. And if we could have put you on full time, we would have already done so. And so goodbye. This really hits home. It could affect this very organization, and it will affect countless thousands of people in California and then across the country, because California is kind of a bellwether for this kind of progressive nonsense. And people go, well, if the largest state in the union is doing that, well, then we certainly should be.
Yeah, Vox Media, the owns all the left-leaning websites, including Vox, which I like to think of as the infotainment site for young adults. They hired 13 or 14, I think it was, full-time employees because of AB-5. And they cut services from over 100 different writers who had been making extra income by writing for Vox. So, yeah. There you go. Bill, I want to read you this. I can't tell you who it's from, but I can tell you it's somebody I know. They had their privacy settings down, but there's somebody who works in politics, works in media, had their income cut in half by AB-5, and knows a lot of people who are also gig workers who are going through the same thing. And I want you to hear what they wrote. Literally looking at posts right now from freelancers and independent contractors who are considering suicide over AB-5. If anyone tells you this is hype, they are lying to you. Deaf people are left with no interpreters in the ER, theaters closing, festivals ending. I know you think I'm just raging because you can't believe it could possibly be this bad. On the outside, it may look to you like business as usual. The state hasn't declared an emergency yet, but I promise you it is very, very, very bad here. I don't know what else to do except what I'm doing, but my heart is wrecked. Someone is going to die soon. I wonder, will people take us seriously then? The left always likes to tell us some ridiculous new law. Well, if it only saves one life. They're ruining lives left and right with this thing, aren't they?
They certainly are. And that person's emotional distress is real, and it's shared by millions of people. And since it's happening in California, most of those people are registered Democrats. I'm not worried about AB-5 in the slightest. I'm not worried about it, and I don't know that I have any violations of it. But if I do have violations of AB-5, I won't conform to them. I simply won't. They're going to have to take me to court on this one. I'm just not going to obey this law. It's an absurd law, and I have no obligation to obey absurd laws that are passed by people who have no idea what they're doing. AB-5, as you pointed out, AB-5 is written in California, and I don't think I can imagine another place in the country or perhaps in the world that has more of a gig-based economy than California. Let's just stay with the United States. All actors who work out here have jobs as they're either actors who make extra money as waiters, or they're waiters who occasionally get a gig or at least go to audition as actors. All of these people are going to be out of one form of work or the other. And so you have to ask yourself, what would drive a California politician to do something, and not just a California politician, all the ones that voted on it. What would drive them to do something this destructive, not only to California, they don't care about that, but to their base, to liberal actors and all of these other things. And there's three things at work here, and they're the perfect storm that has allowed this to happen. Politicians are driven by a need to control other people, by vanity, and by greed. And all three of these things go very strongly in their favor if AB-5 is enacted. Control of people is just what they do. Politicians, especially Democratic politicians, but virtually all politicians, go into politics because they like to tell other people what to do. If all you do is spend your time trying to think of a new way to write a law so that somebody you've never met does something you don't care about, then that's a genetic defect you have, and that's why you go into politics. So it increases politicians' control over people, and that's a plus for Democratic lawmakers in California. The second thing is vanity. Whenever you have a nefarious scheme to grab power and money, we just talked about the power, the one thing you have to have is a fig leaf that allows you to appear to be virtuous while you're doing these nefarious and awful things. You have to have the fig leaf of virtue to appeal to your vanity and to allow the suckers to buy this. And in the case of AB-5, the fig leaf of vanity is, no, we're doing this to protect the little guy. We're doing this to protect the poor guy who just is trying to make a working wage, but these rapacious, evil capitalists are not willing to put them on payroll so that they get, health benefits and all the rest of the stuff. The rich people are hoarding and keeping all the money. And so therefore, we're going to legally mandate that these poor people who are putting hundreds of hours a week without appropriate benefits are going to be made to be employees. We're going to make them employees. That's the fig leaf that allows all of this. But the main thing, as always, is money. And you have to think about what does this affect in terms of money. There are two things at stake here. One of them is, if people are in a gig-based economy, you can't unionize them. There's no graphic designers union that I'm aware of. There's no, union of people who manufacture. I happen to know somebody who has a very good business manufacturing little glass eyes for dolls, and she makes a certain number of them. They go for sale internationally, and they're sold out in less than an hour.
Now, Bill, they do have like a Screen Actors Guild. How does that work? Because I don't know anything about that.
Well, the Screen Actors Guild is another relic of a bygone era, and the Screen Actors Guild protects people who are in the guild. Let me just leave that aside, Scott, because it's a whole different issue. It's just a little more complicated. But basically, what I'm trying to say is there are people now who are working in gig-based economies, like musicians and like Santa Clauses and so on, and they're not unionized, and they can't be unionized because they're on gigs. And if you're a gig worker, you work out of your home. How are you going to unionize people like that? You can't do it. So union dues are missing, and that's part of the answer. But that's not where the real money is. The real money that they're after is the fact that gig-based economies and gig-based things are it's not as easy to enforce our ruinous tax rates on those people. And more importantly than that, gig-based economy, as opposed to a gig-based 1099 employee, rather, as opposed to a regular full-staff employee, is not subject to the one thing that has allowed the federal government to take control of our lives and take all of our money. It's something nobody talks about, but it is the reason that we're in this trouble, and it's very simple. If you're a 1099 employee, I pay you the money, and then you have to write a check to Uncle Sam. But if you're an employee, a regular employee, you never get to see that money. Yeah. It's withheld. It goes directly to Uncle Sam. You never have to write a check for your taxes. You may be having, let's say you get hired at a job at $600 a week and your paycheck is $420. You don't have to write a check 4 times a year to the government, because if you did, you'd own a rifle and you'd be reading about the Federalist Papers. The main reason that they want the gig economy eliminated is by payroll tax withholding is why the government is in California, why they're able to take 50% of what we make. They're able to take 50% of what most people make is because they never get to touch the other 50%. If they were given the other 50% and then had to part with it, then this whole thing would come crashing down. I'm turning off the lights already here. And so this is the main reason that it's so desirable, is to get the tax money withheld in advance, not just to make it more efficient to collect the money, but to make sure that people never get to see how much money they actually make and then have to give up back to the government. That's the entire scam right there. In fact, they've got this piece of chicanery down to such a fine art psychologically that you will hear everybody who gets a regular paycheck from a company, non 1099 workers, right? Every single American you've ever met who works for a company talks about April 15th, not as a day where you have to pony up money, but as a day when you get money back. You hear so many people saying, man, I cannot wait till middle of April when I get my tax refund. So what is that really saying? What that's really saying is over the course of the year, the government has taken $12,000 of your money. And then on April 15th, they give you $700 of it back. And you're over the moon. You're just overjoyed. I get my refund. I can buy things now. Yeah. Gig-based economy gets rid of all of that. Gig-based economy means, like I do and you do and Scott does, 4 times a year, we have to take a look at the money we have in the bank, and we have to write a quarter of that to the federal government. And that is not something that is sustainable among large numbers of poor populations. And as the second wave industrial centralized economy disappears into the information age where everybody has several income streams, the entire tax foundation of this federal monstrosity and this state monstrosity is deeply endangered, and that's why they're doing something this destructive.
Yeah, I'm a gig worker, and I absolutely love it. It gives me the freedom to work from home. It gives me the freedom to spend more time with my kids, all of that good stuff. I am not looking for an office anywhere to have to go to every single day. You know what?
But you know what you pay in taxes, don't you?
I certainly do. I could tell you.
Because you have to write the check.
You know what? Under AB-5, a photographer can't sell, I think it's more than 35 photographs to the same outlet. A writer can't sell more than 35 items to the same publication. A year. I write that many items for PJ Media every month. I write 20 to 25 items for Instapundit every single day. AB-5, if I were living in California, would put me out of work. I honestly don't know what I'd be doing right now. The good news is I don't live in California. I live in Colorado. The bad news is that AB-5, or a version of it, could come to the nation as a whole. The House did this without much fanfare a couple of weeks ago. They passed the PRO Act. I forget what PRO stands for, but I'm sure it's some feeble lie. It's HR 2474. It passed the House. It's waiting for the Senate, where it's going to die, assuming the Republicans hold the Senate. This is still the same session. They will bring this thing back if they can. If the Republicans lose the White House and the Senate to a Democrat in the fall, you can guarantee that AB-5 is going nationwide. What are you going to do about it? That's your right angle on that, brought to you by the members of BillWhittle.com. I'm Steve Green with Bill Whittle and Scott Ott. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.